Hello, I'm Madam Eva, a biology teacher from Educare Tanzania, and I'm here, my dear student, to take you through a series of lectures involving solving of revision questions in our topics in different levels. But in our today's session, we'll deal with the level of Form 4, but in the topic of evolution. And now we are going to make the continuation in the exercise number 4.2, in the question number 4, question number 5, as well as question number 6. Starting with our question number 4, my dear students, you can say, describe the Darwin's key observations pertaining to natural selection from his voyage around the world. We are required to describe the Darwin's observations. Tunahitajika kutoa observations ambazo Darwin aliweza take into consideration kipindi ambako alikuwa anafanya ziara yake dunia yote. As we remember, alipita katika Galapagos Island, akaona some species, akazicompare na species from other island, akafanya lots of observations ili aweze kupata result mbalimbali. Now, as according to the topic in our beloved book of Tanzania Institute of Education, as we remember, tulisoma about the topic of evolution, and if haujaisoma vizuri, you have to take your time now and search to our media, Educare Media Tanzania, tafuta topic ya evolution, utaweza kujipatia vipindi ambavyo vimefundishwa kwa ujumla, na pia you can find it in YouTube ama kwenye other websites, either in Google au whatsoever, ili mradi iwe ni online, unaweza ukapata access ya material yetu bila shida yoyote. And now, my dear student, nakukaribisha to take a solving with me, and then I'll encourage you to study in your book of TAI. Then baada ya kusoma notes, you'll be capable of getting the answer from our media, answers of various questions in that book. As you can see here, we are going now to explore on the observations of Darwin, alizozifanya Darwin. And now, before tujaenda kujibu swali letu, inabidi tujue Darwin alituletea observations ngapi. As we can remember, alikuwa na observations 4. As you can see here, observation number 1 ilikuwa ni overproduction of offsprings. My dear student, the first thing ambacho Darwin alikiobserve is the overproduction of the offspring. Aliobserve uzalishwaji mkubwa wa offsprings, ambako hapa tukirejea katika notes au kitabu cha TAI tutaona kwamba aliangalia water turtles. Water turtles, they lay lots of eggs, thousands of eggs, and those eggs zinakuwa hatched at the same time. After then, those offsprings wana spread throughout the aquatic environment, ambako hapo tunaenda kuona kwamba the production of offspring inakuwa ina exceed the carrying capacity of the environment. That is what Darwin observed at the first time. As you can see, Darwin observed that all living things are capable of producing more offspring than the environment can support. Example, sea turtles can lay from 7 to 190 eggs at a time. Kwamba tunaenda kuona kwamba Darwin aliweza kuobserve kwamba organisms in the environment, they tend to produce more and more than the environment can support. For instance, here you can see sea turtles. They tend to lay 70 to 190 eggs per time. Yani kwa muda tu anaweza kataga tu mayai 70 kwa mara moja. Take an example kwamba that turtle atabidi atage labda kwa wiki moja. Kila siku atage mayai 70 ama 190. Ufanye hesabu hapo utakuta kwamba ni lots of eggs ambazo zitakuwa laid, and then after zikija kuwa hatched, it means that lots of offspring will be there at the environment, and they will exceed the carrying capacity of the environment. So I hope you understand about the first observation, which is all about overproduction of the offspring. This is according to Darwin, my dear student. And now we are going to take a look on observation number 2, which is survival of the fittest. In the struggle for existence, only those organisms with favorable adaptive characteristics have reproductive and survival advantage. In the struggle for the existence, only those organisms with favorable adaptive characteristics have reproductive and survival advantage. Tukija kwenye survival of the fittest, here we are talking about the struggling, organism struggling. As organism, they struggle, maybe they struggle for a certain resource, or they compete for the certain resource. For those organisms which will have the certain traits which are favored, which are favorable for the changing in environmental condition, they will be capable of surviving and passing on their reproductive succession to another generation. That is all about the survival for the fittest. Tunajua kwamba Darwin alikuwa anapita kwenye mazingira, alikuwa anaona organism ama species wa namna mbalimbali, na at the same time kulikuwa kuna varying in environmental conditions. It means kwamba the environment change from its current situation ina change inaenda kwenye another situation, meaning that the changes, the second change might lead organisms, those organisms which will fail to adapt to that change to perish out. So Darwin noticed that those organisms survived just because they possess some traits which were capable, which were enabling them to survive in that environment. So he came up with the second observation, which is survival for the fittest. As you can see here, those with unfavorable characteristics have limited chance in the struggle for existence and therefore perish. That is all about the survival for the fittest. Again, you can see observation number 3, which is variation in characteristics. As you can see, members of the same species show variation in characteristics such as color, shape, size, or behavior. When we talk about variation in characteristics, we mean that Darwin, in his voyage around the world, he observed there are different species belonging to a certain habitat or in a single population, but they vary in their shape, their size, even their color. Even though if they belong to the same species, they might vary, and that is the second observation according to Darwin. Again, observation number 4, we can see some characteristics are inherited and passed on the next generation. First observation, we see that Darwin observed that there was overproduction. The second observation, akaona kuna survival of the fittest. But the third one, akaona kuna existence of variation among organisms. And the fourth one, akadetermine kwamba those variations can be inherited from generation to generation. And that's all about the fourth observation. That some characteristics are inherited and passed on the next generation. Kuna traits, kuna variations mbalimbali. Tunasema kwamba zile traits ndio zina bring about variations, so zinakuwa inherited kutoka generation moja na nyingine, na zitatokea hivyo tu pale ambako zitakuwa zisha survive the harsh environment or the scarcity of certain resources. That's zinakuwa ni reproductive successful. And then you can see the observation was that many advantageous characteristics are passed on from parent to offspring. Consider advantageous, consider the word advantageous. Many advantageous characteristics of the organisms zilikuwa ni capable to be passed from generation to generation or from parents to offsprings. And that is all about that. And now, my dear students, this was all about the question number 4 about the observations of Darwin as alivyokuwa anafanya voyage ama ziara around the world. And now we are going to question number 5, in which this question is going to look on the other side, the deductions proposed by the Darwin after his voyage around the world. As you can see here, our question needs us to explain the major deductions made by Darwin after observations from his voyage around the world. So this is the next question to the question number 4. As we can remember, in the lessons we learned here at our media, we learned on the observations and the deductions. They were together, and if you get the time, you'll have to pass through some sessions taught here at our Good Media, Educare Media Tanzania, concerning the topic of evolution. You'll get at that point where we teach those deductions and observations together. And now, because the questions are separable, now you will have to answer the first question, which was in requiring the points of observations, and now you will deal with this question which is in need of the deductions of Darwin. And now as you can see, also deductions zilikuwa ni tatu. The first deduction is that there is a struggle for existence. Deduction is just like mawazo au tunasema ni opinions za Darwin. Baada ya kufanya hizo observations zake, alikuja na findings gani au alisema vitu gani? That is all about deduction. So he said there is a struggle for existence because as Darwin alivyokuwa anafanya observations zake, aligundua kwamba ili wale fiti waweze kusurvive there must be struggling. Lazima wale organism wafanye struggling, and those organisms ambao watasurvive the struggle watakuwa ndo fiti na wataweza kupasi character zao kwenda kwenye another generation. And that's why Darwin akasuggest kwamba yes, as organisms survive, as organisms live, there might be the struggle. Maybe struggle for the resources, essential resources like food, water, light, space, as well as light. And you can see here, Darwin concluded that overreproduction results in competition among the newly-produced organisms due to limited resources, including food, shelter, space, and breeding mates. My dear student, as you can see here, this deduction of Darwin alitoa kwenye observation ya overproduction. Aliobserve, yes, there is overproduction. Wamezaliwa organism wengi, space ni ndogo, so they will struggle for existing in that small space. Maybe wamezaliwa lakini food ni chakula ni kidogo. They must struggle so that they will survive for that small food. So wale organism ambao watakuwa ni struggle enough kuweza watakuwa ni fit enough kuweza kustruggle na kuweza kupata kile chakula wataishi. That is the struggle for existence. So ili uweze kuexist, lazima ustruggle upate kile kitu ambacho kitakuwezesha wewe kuexist. That is according to Darwin. And another deduction we can see, it is all about natural selection or survival of the fittest. Kulikuwa kuna natural selection, or we can say survival of the fittest. When we talk about natural selection, it means that nature will select, organism will be selected naturally. Kama organism ameshindwa kustruggle, ameshindwa kusurvive the harsh environmental condition, au ameshindwa kucompete enough wakaweza kupata ile resources ambayo ilikuwa ni essential for their survival, thus that organism will perish out and naturally will be selected against the environment. But those organisms ambao watakuwa fit enough kuweza kupambania ile resources ambao walikuwa na compete, those organisms will be selected for. Watakuwa selected for. Na wataweza kusurvive the harsh condition of the environment. As you can see here, in the struggle for existence, only those organisms with favorable adaptive characteristics, they were capable of surviving. As you can see, Darwin concluded that nature selects only those organisms which carry favorable characteristics, have reproductive and survival advantages, and vice versa. According to Darwin, alituambia kwamba nature ilikuwa ina uwezo wa kuselect organisms wote ambao walikuwa na adaptive characteristics na walikuwa wanaweza kuwa reproductive successful na walikuwa wanaweza kusurvive, na kinyume chake ni kweli kwamba those organisms ambao walikuwa ni unfit walikuwa wanakuwa selected against the conditions of the environment. And this is the third deduction. As we can see here, this is the second one. This is the third deduction in which there was inherited features. Pia Darwin aliobserve inherited features, kwamba kulikuwa kuna inherited features. On how it means that wale organism ambao waliweza kuwa selected in natural selection au waliokuwa fit enough kuweza kusurvive, it means that their traits zilikuwa inherited to the next generation or from the parents to the offspring. As you can see here, the characteristics that favored an organism to survive in particular environment are selected in natural way For natural selection to act on certain characteristics, there must be variations, and variations must be heritable. Ili natural selection iact kwenye certain characteristics, lazima kuwe kuna utofautiano, na hiyo variation ndio ambayo inakuwa herited, kwa sababu variation au character ambayo itakuwa fit enough kuweza kusurvive ndiyo ambayo itaweza kuwa passed on kutoka generation moja kwenda generation nyingine. And that's all about the deductions of Darwin theory, or we can say deductions au mapendekezo ya Darwin alivyofanya ziara around the world. And now we are going to the question number 60, which is the last question in our today's session. We are required to explain the ways in which the modern synthesis theory of evolution is different from Darwin theory in explaining the mechanism of evolution. Tutoe explanation ama difference on how modern synthesis theory vary from Darwin theory of evolution. As you can see here, firstly, the modern synthesis theory of evolution integrates Darwin's original ideas with advancement in genetics and other biological sciences. And here are the key differences between the two. First of all, my dear students, we have to remember that modern synthesis theory is the neo-Darwinism, is the theory after Darwin theory. And now we are going to look on the differences between the two. As you can see here, we will talk about genetics and heredity in Darwin as well as in modern synthesis theory. You can differentiate in various ways wherever you want, maybe using a table or whatsoever, but you can use key terms like this and then you provide the difference as explanations. As you can see here, Darwin's theory proposed natural selection as the primary mechanism of evolution, but had a limited understanding of how traits were inherited. And he relied on the concept of blending inheritance, where offsprings were thought to be a mix of parental traits. So on genetics and heredity hakutoa the critical mechanism itakaotuonyesha how traits are being inherited, but alituambia tu ni some sort of mixing, trait mixing between parents and parents to obtain the offspring. On the other side, on the modern synthesis, we can see the modern synthesis incorporates Mendelian genetics, explaining that the traits are inheritable through discrete units called the genes. It recognizes that variations are caused by mutations in these genes and that these variations can be passed on to the future generation. Kwa this difference imekaa kwa mfumo huu kwamba Darwin failed to explore deep on the genetics and heredity, but modern synthesis theory explored deep on the genetics and the inheritance. And now on the second point, we will talk about population genetics. As you can see, Darwin's theory focused primarily on individual organisms and their survival without a strong emphasis on a population dynamics. Kwa hiyo Darwin ali-emphasize kwenye individual rather than the population. Aliangalia tu kwenye survival ya individual atakayekuwa fit to survive, atasurvive and so forth, atapasi the trait kwenda kwenye generation nyingine, but hakuangalia the impact on the whole population. But on the modern synthesis theory, this theory emphasizes the role of populations as the unit of evolution. Modern synthesis theory consider population, umuhimu wa population kama kiini cha evolution, but Darwin aliconsider individual as the unit of evolution. Again, we are going to see more explanations. Modern synthesis uses population genetics to study how allele frequencies change over time due to mechanisms like natural selection, genetic drift, mutation, and gene flow. That is all about the modern synthesis theory in comparison with the Darwin theory. The third one is all about mechanism of evolution. In Darwin's theory, while Darwin acknowledged natural selection, he did not fully understand the role of other mechanisms such as genetic drift, gene flow, as well as a mutation. Alizungumzia tu the role of natural selection, aka-ignore other factors. But the modern synthesis theory, it includes multiple mechanisms of evolution, natural selection, genetic drift, gene flow, as well as mutation. This broader perspective allows for a more comprehensive understanding of evolutionary process. So, modern synthesis theory ilitoa broader understanding on the evolutionary process since it involve all four forces of evolution. Again, we are going to look on the role of variation. You can see Darwin's theory, variation was seen as essential for natural selection, but the source of this variation was not well understood. Alituambia variation ilikuwa kama source ya evolution, but the main source of this variation hakutuelezea. That is Darwin. But in modern synthesis, it emphasizes that genetic mutations are the primary sources of variation upon which natural selection acts, and the understanding that mutation can create new alleles has depended the comprehension of how evolutionary changes occurs. So, modern synthesis theory ilionyesha role ya other factors katika variation. Also, tunaenda kuangalia speciation. As we can see, Darwin proposed that new species arise through gradual changes over time, which is phyletic gradualism. But modern synthesis recognize both gradualism and punctuated equilibrium as valid explanation for speciation. This reflects a more nuanced understanding of how species evolve over time. So, according to modern synthesis, it consider speciation as well as punctuated equilibrium. Punctuated equilibrium tukimaanisha ni ile tunazungumzia ni periods of rapid change followed by stability au followed by stasis. That is all about punctuated equilibrium. Also, there is integration with other fields. Darwinian theory primarily focused on natural history and observation from the field, but modern synthesis integrates findings from paleontology, biogeography, systematics, and ecology, creating a more holistic view of evolution. Ukiangalia Darwin aliconsider tu paleontology, but modern synthesis theory iliangalia field nyingine mbalimbali kuweza kuexplain vizuri about evolution. And in conclusion, the modern synthesis builds on Darwin's foundational idea while incorporating genetic principles and a broader understanding of evolutionary mechanism, provide a more comprehensive framework for evolution. Kwa hiyo, modern synthesis theory ilitoka kwenye Darwin's theory na ikaweza kuexplainiwa vizuri kutoka kwenye misingi ya Darwin theory. And up to here, my dear student, this marks the end of our session and the end of our exercise number 4.2. I would like to welcome you to the proceeding session of the revision exercise number 4. Thank you for following us, Educare Media Tanzania, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share.